Undercover CEO visits his own bakery and could not believe when he hears what two kids are saying behind him. Oliver Bennett loved his bakery, Bennett's Bakes. It was more than a business. It was his legacy, built from scratch with passion, long hours, and countless sacrifices. Every cake, every loaf of bread, every warm pastry carried a piece of his heart. Yet something felt off. The reviews were glowing, the sales steady, and the staff appeared content. But deep down, Oliver couldn't shake the feeling that he was losing touch with the heartbeat of his bakery. So he decided to do what he had done once before: go undercover. Not as a baker, not as a delivery man, but this time as just another customer. Dressed in a worn hoodie, jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low over his face, Oliver stepped through the doors of his own bakery one rainy afternoon. The scent of fresh cinnamon rolls and vanilla bean lattes filled the air, wrapping around him like a warm hug. Customers chatted, children laughed, and baristas worked swiftly behind the counter. Slipping into a booth near the back, Oliver scanned the room. The bakery was alive, thriving. A friendly server approached him, her smile polite but distant. "Good afternoon. Can I get you something to drink?" "Just water, thanks," Oliver said, keeping his voice casual. He needed to blend in, to observe, to feel what his bakery had become through the eyes of the people who mattered most, his customers. As he pretended to browse the menu, voices from the booth behind him caught his attention. "Do you think he'll even show up?" a young voice whispered, nervous, hopeful. "I don't know," another voice answered, sharper, more determined. "Mom said this is where he comes. She said this place used to be everything to him." Oliver's pulse quickened, a sudden weight settling in his chest. Who were these kids talking about? His fingers tensed around the menu, but he wasn't reading it anymore. Every word from their hushed conversation sent another jolt through his nerves. "What if we get caught?" the first voice whispered, the tremor in his tone unmistakable. Fear, uncertainty. "We're not even supposed to be here." "We won't get caught," the second voice shot back, low and firm, determined. "We just need to figure out who he is." Oliver swallowed hard. There was a raw intensity in their words, something deeper than innocent curiosity, something personal. He forced himself to keep his breathing steady, to stay still, but his body betrayed him. His grip on the menu tightened, his shoulders stiffened. Then the words that sent ice through his veins. "Mom said it's his fault we lost everything." His fault. A strange coldness spread through Oliver's limbs, clashing with the warmth of the bakery. His heartbeat pounded in his ears, drowning out the chatter and the clinking of mugs around him. His throat went dry. He didn't know these kids, but they seemed to know him. And from the way they spoke, angry, bitter, determined, he had the sinking feeling that whatever they thought he had done, it wasn't something they were willing to forget. Oliver's breath came slow and steady, but his mind was anything but calm. Thoughts collided in a chaotic storm. Who were these kids? Who was their mother? And why did she believe he had ruined their lives? A sudden voice snapped him back. "Ready to order?" Oliver blinked, realizing the server was standing there, pen poised. Yeah, just the house special," he mumbled, barely registering his own words. The moment she walked away, his focus snapped back to the conversation behind him. "Mom said he wouldn't hide," the second boy murmured, his voice tinged with a quiet certainty. "If he's here, we'll find him." Oliver's stomach twisted. They were looking for someone, and from the way they spoke, they were sure they'd find him. His skin prickled with unease. Did they already suspect? Did they know? He forced himself to remain still, his hands flat against the table. He had to find out more. Who they were talking about, why they were here. Slowly, carefully, he pushed back from the table and made his way toward the counter. The boys were still deep in conversation, unaware of his movements. He approached the cashier, keeping his tone casual. "Hey," he said, nodding toward the boys. "Those two kids in the back, do they come here often?" The cashier glanced over her shoulder, then shrugged. "Never seen them before. Why?" Oliver hesitated. His pulse pounded in his ears. "No reason," he muttered, forcing a neutral expression. But inside he knew. There was a reason, a big one. Returning to his booth, he studied them more closely. The older one, probably 14, had a mop of curly hair spilling from under his hoodie. The younger, around 12, sat hunched over, his baseball cap pulled low as if trying to disappear. Then, without warning, the older boy froze. "Wait a second," he whispered, his eyes locking onto Oliver. His breath hitched, realization dawning in his expression. Oliver's stomach dropped. The younger boy's face paled. "No way!" The older one shoved back his chair, standing abruptly, his hands clenched into fists. His voice was thick with barely contained anger. "You're him, aren't you?" Oliver exhaled slowly, keeping his voice steady despite the sinking feeling in his gut. "Who's your mother?" he asked cautiously. The older boy's jaw tightened, his body rigid with tension. His voice trembled, but it wasn't with fear. "You really don't remember, do you?" he spat. Then the name that hit Oliver like a sledgehammer. "Emily Carter." His chest tightened. The air felt suddenly heavier. Emily. He hadn't heard that name in years, but now it rang in his ears like a ghost from the past. The older boy's eyes burned with resentment. "She worked here," he said, his voice sharp with accusation. "She built this place with you, and you threw her away." If you're enjoying this emotional roller coaster and want more Undercover CEO stories like this, make sure to subscribe to Undercover Files. We've got a brand new story every day, packed with drama, suspense, and surprises. Don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button now. The boy's words cut deep, slicing through Oliver's chest like a blade. Emily Carter. The name alone carried weight, memories, emotions, and now, accusations. She had been one of his most talented bakers, passionate, creative, a perfectionist, and yes, someone he had once trusted deeply. "I never," Oliver started, his voice barely above a whisper, but the boy wasn't interested in excuses. "You stole her recipes." His voice was sharp, shaking with barely contained fury. "You took all the credit. She poured her soul into this place, and you erased her like she was nothing." Oliver's throat went dry. His fingers clenched into fists beneath the table. "That's not true," he said, though the words felt weak the moment they left his mouth. The older boy's eyes flashed. "Then why did every article about your bakery praise you, and only you? Why did she have to leave with nothing?" His voice cracked slightly, but he straightened, holding Oliver's gaze with unwavering intensity. "When she tried to stand up for herself, you destroyed her." Oliver's stomach twisted. He had been ambitious, yes, competitive, ruthless even. But had he really done that? Had his relentless drive for success blinded him to the damage he had left in his wake? "I need to see your mother," he said firmly, the weight of guilt pressing down on his chest. "Please." The boys exchanged a look. There was hesitation, uncertainty, but also something else, a test. The younger boy finally spoke, his voice quiet but sharp. "Why?" Oliver exhaled slowly. "Because if I really did what she says I did, I need to make it right." Silence hung between them, thick and suffocating. Finally, the older one muttered, "If you really care, come with us." Oliver nodded, but deep down a terrible question gnawed at him. What if it was already too late? The apartment complex was small, worn, a stark contrast to the warm glow of Bennett's bakes. The walls were thin, the air stale, and the faint hum of a broken heater in the corner added to the overall feeling of neglect. Emily Carter had once been part of something grand, and now her life felt like it had been reduced to this. When Emily opened the door, her eyes widened in shock. Her gaze softened for only a second, then just as quickly hardened. "Oliver Bennett," she said coldly, "I never thought I'd see you here." Her voice was sharp, layered with years of unresolved pain. The bitterness in her tone was something Oliver hadn't prepared for. He had hoped for a chance at redemption, but he hadn't realized how much damage his actions had done. "I need to know the truth," Oliver said, his voice soft but firm. "Did I really take everything from you?" Emily's lips trembled for a moment, her hands gripping the doorframe as if holding herself together. It was as if the very thought of answering would tear her apart. She took a deep breath and stepped aside, letting him in. Inside, the apartment felt even more cramped than it appeared from the outside. The furnishings were sparse, the walls lined with photos of her two sons growing up. Oliver could see the weight of her sacrifices in every corner of the room. Emily motioned toward a worn-out sofa. She sat down, folding her hands in her lap. The boys stood silently near the door, their presence a quiet but palpable reminder of the story that had yet to be fully told. "You really want to know the truth," Emily finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You think a job at your bakery can fix everything?" Oliver nodded. "It's not just a job. I'm offering you a chance to take back what was yours. Full credit, full control. As head baker, I want to make this right." Emily stared at him, her gaze piercing and unwavering. Her eyes betrayed her emotions: hurt, betrayal, longing. "You never cared about me, Oliver. You never cared about the work I put in. You used me, and when I dared to stand up for myself, you pushed me out. You didn't just take my job, you took my passion, you destroyed my career, and you know what the worst part is? You don't even remember." Oliver's heart clenched. "I didn't," Emily interrupted him, her voice growing more emotional. "You don't get it, do you? It wasn't just the bakery, it was everything. You took my recipes, my ideas, my love for this place. You gave them to other people and let them take the credit. And when I tried to fight back, you blacklisted me. No one would hire me. I had nothing. It was just me and these two boys." The older boy, who had been silently watching the exchange, shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. His presence in the room was a constant reminder of how deeply Emily's pain ran. "I couldn't even get a job baking at a local cafe," Emily continued, her voice shaking. "They all knew who I was. They knew what happened. And I had to watch as you built an empire off what I created, off what we built together." Oliver sat down across from her, his hands resting in his lap. He felt the weight of her words sink in like a 1,000-pound stone. Every accusation hit him with the force of a tidal wave, pulling him under, drowning him in guilt. "I was selfish," he admitted, his voice hoarse. "I was driven, but I lost sight of the people who helped me get here. I thought I was doing what was best, but I see now that I was wrong. I can't change the past, but I want to make it right." Emily looked away, her eyes filling with unshed tears. "You think a job is going to fix this?" she asked again, her voice trembling. "You think you can just wave a magic wand and erase the years of struggle I went through? The humiliation? The anger?" Oliver leaned forward, his gaze softening. "I don't think it will fix everything. But maybe, just maybe, it's a start." The silence between them stretched for what felt like an eternity. Oliver could see the battle waging within Emily. She was torn between the woman who had been wronged and the woman who still loved the bakery, the woman who had poured her heart and soul into the business. Finally, Emily spoke again, her voice quiet but resolute. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Oliver. I don't know if I ever will." Oliver nodded slowly. "I understand. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, but I am asking for a chance to make it right." Her eyes searched his face, as though looking for something she hadn't found in years. Finally, she extended her hand toward him. "Let's see if you mean it," she said, her voice laced with a quiet strength. As Oliver shook her hand, he knew this wasn't the end of their story. It was the beginning of something far more difficult and far more meaningful than he had ever expected. Redemption wouldn't come easy, but he was ready to fight for it. And for Emily, maybe, just maybe, she would find a way to forgive him. The weeks passed, and slowly but surely Emily returned to Bennett's Bakes. It wasn't an easy transition, and the scars of the past still lingered, but Emily's return marked the beginning of a new chapter for both her and the bakery. Her boys, now much happier with their mother's joy returned, helped her set up the kitchen, excited to see their mom finally receiving the recognition she deserved. The atmosphere in the bakery shifted from one of guilt and quiet tension to one of growth and renewal. Oliver kept his promise. Emily had full control over her station, and her creative vision was brought to life in every pastry that came out of the oven. The recipes that had once been stolen were now hers to perfect again. Her boys were finally able to see their mother truly flourish in a place she loved. The healing didn't come overnight, but it did come. As Emily's confidence grew, so did her bond with Oliver, though it remained complicated. They were no longer just business partners. They were two people working through the rubble of their past to rebuild something beautiful. And in the end, that was enough for Emily, enough for her boys, enough for the bakery. Remember to check out more Undercover CEO stories like this in the description below.